Story number 1. The House at the End of Maple Street. This is the story of a woman named Lauren Mitchell, a 35-year-old graphic designer who moved to a small town in Pennsylvania in the spring of 2018. She wasn't looking for much, just a quiet place where she could work from home, away from the chaos of the city. What she found instead was a house that would slowly and silently pull her into something she could never explain. Lauren had always been practical. She didn't believe in ghosts, omens, or cursed places. So when she found the 2-story colonial house at the very end of Maple Street, listed for nearly half the market price, she didn't question it. The realtor said the previous owner, an elderly widow named Mrs. Palmer, had passed away peacefully in her sleep. The house was old but charming, white paint peeling slightly from the porch railings, ivy climbing up the brick walls, and a big oak tree that cast long shadows over the front yard. It had that old America kind of beauty, quiet, nostalgic, a little lonely. Lauren moved in on a Friday. By Sunday, she had unpacked most of her things. On Monday, she noticed something strange for the first time. It was the door to the basement. It was locked, and the key was nowhere to be found. When she asked the realtor about it, he just shrugged. He said, "Probably just storage. Old houses like that always have locked doors. Sometimes the keys get lost over the years." Lauren didn't think much of it until a week later when she began to hear sounds coming from below her living room floor. At first it was faint, a dull creak, maybe the house settling. But over the next few nights it grew distinct, like someone dragging furniture slowly across the floor beneath her. Then came the knocking. Once, twice, 3 times, always between 2 and 3 a.m. Lauren tried to tell herself it was her imagination. Old pipes, raccoons, maybe even the wind. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the noises were too deliberate, too human. On April 10th, she decided to record it. She placed her phone near the floor before going to bed. The next morning, when she played it back, she heard the knocking clearly. 3 sharp raps, followed by a soft, muffled voice. It was impossible to make out what it said, but it sounded like a woman whispering. That night, she couldn't sleep. The next day, she called a locksmith to open the basement door. The man arrived around noon. He joked about haunted basements as he worked the lock until it actually opened. A cold, musty smell filled the air. Lauren turned on her flashlight and stepped down the stairs. The basement was ordinary enough. Dusty shelves, boxes, an old water heater, but there was something odd about the far wall. The bricks looked newer, like they had been replaced recently. The locksmith noticed it too. He said, probably patched up some old damage, but Lauren wasn't convinced. Later that week, she found something else. In the attic, inside a box labeled MISC, she discovered a stack of old newspapers, all from the early 1990s. The headline on one read, "Local woman found dead in basement. Police suspect foul play." The name below the headline made her blood run cold. Margaret Palmer. Mrs. Palmer, the same name as the old woman who supposedly died peacefully in her sleep. She tried to find more online. There was no mention of any homicide, no police records, no obituaries. It was as if the story had been erased, but the newspaper was real, yellowed, torn, and smelling faintly of mold. That night she called her friend Evan, who lived about an hour away. He laughed it off at first, but agreed to come by that weekend to help her debunk the ghost theory. On Friday, they returned to the basement together. Evan knocked on the patched wall and froze. It sounded hollow. "Someone built over something," he said. Lauren's heart raced. Against her better judgment, they began to chip away at the bricks. After half an hour, they exposed a small cavity, just big enough to see inside. Inside was a chair, rusted and chained to the floor. And beside it, a small, decayed bundle of fabric. Evan swore and stumbled back. Lauren shined her light again, and for a brief second, something glinted inside the pile. She reached in and pulled it out, a gold necklace with a small engraving. "To Margaret, love, Henry." She dropped it immediately. Evan called the sheriff. They came the next morning and sealed off the house for investigation. A forensic team arrived, and over the next few days they confirmed what Lauren had feared. Human remains were found beneath the bricks. The coroner's report suggested the body had been there for nearly 30 years. When authorities traced the property records, they discovered that Mrs. Palmer's husband, Henry, vanished in 1992 after being questioned for domestic abuse. No one ever saw him again. The case went cold. Until now. What's chilling is what happened next. After the remains were removed, Lauren tried to move on. She sold the house within 2 months and left town. But the new owners lasted only a few weeks before abandoning the place. They told neighbors that the basement door would open on its own, even after they bolted it shut. They said at night they'd hear a woman crying from the basement, whispering a single word, over and over: "Help." Police were called multiple times for noise complaints, but every time they arrived, the house was silent. As of today, the house at the end of Maple Street remains vacant. The for sale sign still stands, faded and rusted. Locals say they sometimes see a light flicker in the basement window around 2 a.m., even though there's no electricity connected to the property.
Story number 2, The Late Night Caller. This is the story of Ethan Miller, a 27-year-old freelance video editor from Portland, Oregon. In 2019, Ethan moved into a small one-bedroom apartment on the city's east side, near a quiet stretch of industrial buildings and train tracks. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was peaceful enough, and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. Perfect for someone who worked odd hours and liked being alone. But within a few months, that quiet isolation turned into something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Ethan's work schedule kept him awake late. Most nights, he'd still be editing around 2 or 3 a.m., his apartment lit only by the glow of his computer screen. It was around that time, just after 3 a.m., when the first call came. His phone buzzed once, and the screen flashed "Unknown caller." Normally, he ignored spam calls, but this one came in the middle of the night, which felt strange. He declined it. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. No voicemail, no text. He finally answered on the third ring. There was no one on the line, just silence. Then, faintly, what sounded like breathing. Not static, not background noise, real, slow breathing. Ethan hung up, annoyed, but not scared. Maybe a wrong number, he thought. Maybe some drunk kid prank calling random people. The next night, the call came again. Same time, 3:07 a.m. This time, Ethan didn't answer, but the phone kept ringing every few minutes over and over until he finally turned it off. When he woke up later that morning, he checked his call log. 13 missed calls from the same unknown number. By the third night, Ethan had started feeling uneasy. He tried blocking the number, but somehow the calls kept coming through. Always after 3 a.m., always the same silence followed by breathing. Sometimes he swore he could hear a whisper, so faint he couldn't make out the words. He mentioned it to his friend Caleb, who laughed it off and told him to report it to his carrier. Ethan agreed, but something about the pattern bothered him. The timing, the persistence, it felt personal, as if whoever it was knew when he'd be awake. The following week, the calls stopped for 3 days. Ethan started sleeping better, convincing himself it was over. Then, on Thursday night, his phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, a voicemail. The number was still unknown. When he played it, his stomach dropped. The message was only 6 seconds long. It was a woman's voice whispering directly into the receiver. "You shouldn't have moved here." Ethan froze. The voice sounded close, like she was standing right beside the microphone. He immediately called Caleb and played the message. Caleb thought it was some kind of joke, maybe a wrong number from someone who got spooked by an old tenant's debt. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that it was directed at him. He'd only been in the apartment for 5 months. He didn't know anyone in the building except his landlord, Mrs. Dorsey, an elderly widow who lived upstairs. That weekend, he went to talk to her. When he mentioned the phone calls, her expression changed instantly. She hesitated before speaking. She said, "Did the number show up as private?" When he nodded, she sighed. "You're not the first tenant to get those calls." She told him that 2 years earlier, a young woman named Hannah Gray had lived in Ethan's unit. She worked nights at a diner and would come home around 2 a.m. One night, neighbors heard screaming, but by the time police arrived, the door was unlocked and the apartment was empty. Hannah was never found. Her phone was discovered on the kitchen counter, still ringing. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Mrs. Dorsey said police suspected an abduction, but there were no signs of forced entry. The case went cold. After that, she'd rented the place to several people, but most didn't stay long. She said, they'd say they get calls too. Always late, always from an unknown number. That night, Ethan decided to record everything. He set up his webcam facing the front door and left his phone on the table with the ringer on loud. He stayed awake until 3 a.m., waiting. At 3:04, the phone rang. Unknown caller. He hit record on his webcam and answered the call without speaking. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, that same soft breathing. He stayed silent, heart pounding. Then the voice came again. "Why did you open the door?" Ethan froze. He hadn't opened any door. He looked at his apartment door. It was locked. He ended the call immediately, ran to the door, and checked the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. He double-checked the windows, still locked. The next morning, he reviewed the webcam footage. At 3:05 a.m., just as the call came through, the front doorknob turned, slowly. Once, twice. Then it stopped. No one was visible. Ethan went straight to the police. They took a report, reviewed the footage, and promised to increase patrols, but there wasn't much they could do. "It's probably a prank, someone with a voice changer and a spoofed number," the officer said. That night, Ethan packed his things. He planned to crash at Caleb's place until he found a new apartment. But when he went to unplug his phone charger, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The phone wire wasn't his. It was different, a slightly older model cord, the kind used on landlines years ago. He didn't own one, and he hadn't seen it before. It ran from the outlet to behind his TV stand. When he moved the furniture, he found an old wall jack hidden behind a loose panel, connected to a disconnected landline wire. Someone had reconnected it. He ripped it out, threw it away, and left the apartment that night. 2 days later, police called. They checked the phone records tied to that number. It wasn't a spoofed call. The number was registered to Hannah Gray, the missing tenant from 2 years earlier. Ethan didn't go back for the rest of his things. He moved out of Portland completely, changed his number, and never used that phone again. To this day, the apartment remains rented, but briefly. Each new tenant eventually complains about the same thing. Calls in the middle of the night, a woman whispering from an unknown number. And sometimes when they answer, she says the same thing Ethan once heard. "You shouldn't have moved here."